So from the role of a judge, what do you feel makes a good advocate? Because you must see the good and the bad of advocacy.
That's an interesting question. What makes a good advocate? I think the good advocate knows who they're talking to. They pitch it just right because they know their tribunal. Advocacy in front of magistrates is very different than advocacy in front of judges. Understanding some of the levers, what really impacts decision making. Understanding sentencing guidelines. Being able to pick out the relevant from the non-relevant and hitting that sweet spot, which is understanding what is the real issue here? What is the real issue? And just really focusing on that. Getting your best point in first. I mean, there are so many things that I could say, but it's not about quantity.
It's to know when to stop talking sometimes as well.
It is. It is.
And in your role as a judge, you must see repeat offenders coming through the court system. And through this series, there's been an underlying theme that if drug addiction, alcohol addiction, mental health was dealt with, some of these people wouldn't be going through the court system and ending up potentially in prison. Do you have a view on that at all?
Judges are at the end of a process, and we operate within the parameters of the environment and the space we're in. But you're right in the sense that all these things impact on repeat offending, and the more interventions there can be will impact different people in different ways. And so programs will work for a lot of people. That can be incorporated in sentencing, it can be diversion, it can be lots of things that happen in people's lives long before they get involved in the criminal justice process. So one has to accept the space in which judges operate. A lot of these things happen in people's lives long before. It could be about education, it could be about their housing, it could be about so many different things that have happened in their lives. And we are right at the end where they've broken the law, or it's alleged they've broken the law, and we have to find solutions. One, to reflect society's disapproval of what they've done, but to protect the public and to ensure that the public also have confidence in that process.
Sort of taking that back a bit to the sentencing guidelines that we were talking about earlier, and you mentioned that there are each case turns on its facts, and each set of facts will be uniquely variable. And I wondered then, as a judge, how much you were allowed to take into consideration the background that you might have heard about the person standing in front of you.
Well, personal mitigation is central to sentencing. Who you are dealing with, their reasons for being in front of you today is part of that process. But it's not the only consideration. They've committed an offence, and that offence has a degree of seriousness. And so your starting point is, what have they done? But it is certainly part of the overall consideration as to their life circumstances.
And are there measures in place, and if so, could you talk a bit about them, to address issues of unconscious bias that perhaps are an issue with a lot of different institutions, not specific to the judiciary, is what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a very important point that subconscious bias exists in all spheres of our lives. It exists everywhere. And we have to recognise that it is something all human beings do. It's natural. We were programmed to make shortcut decisions. That's an evolutionary issue. So the fact that there is subconscious bias in itself is not a horrible, oh, why does it exist? It exists. What we do is we do have training for all our judges on identifying the risks of subconscious bias, how it can manifest itself in the courtroom, so that the more aware our judges are of the risks associated with bias, that they can consciously not compensate, but ensure that bias doesn't enter in the ultimate decision-making process. So it's really about heightening awareness of these issues, which isn't unique to the judges. It's in every workplace, it's in every conversation, it's in every family. It's out there.
Yeah. And I wonder if what we were talking about, or James and you were talking about earlier, about encouraging interest and engagement with the criminal justice system, whether it's through jury service or through perhaps a broader range of demographic on the magistrates' bench, might feed into that from a different angle as well.
I agree with you. The more understanding there is of the system, the different roles that the different actors have within the criminal justice process, in particular issues such as the rule of law and independence of the judiciary. This sort of core fundamental understanding there has to be that judges are robustly independent of the police, they're independent of the state, that they're accountable to the law, they're not accountable to politicians, they're not accountable in that way. And this idea that the reason why we live in such a brilliant place is there is a rule of law. There are a set of laws, they apply to everyone, and when things go wrong, a justice system will intervene and ensure that everyone is dealt with equally. And getting those messages across is really important.
So, in your role as a judge, where you sit in a court is higher than everybody else?
Can be. Different courtrooms have different layouts. If I'm sitting in a youth court, I don't sit higher than other people.
And do you wear a gown and a wig?
No. I do wear a gown, but I'm unusual as a district judge in that I wear a gown. It's a tradition of the City of London and Westminster. But I don't wear a wig. I used to be a judge on a British overseas territory. There I did wear the wig and the gown and the bands and the full.
Was that a requirement, or did you just feel that it was necessary in that different situation?
There are many traditions which are handed down in the judiciary, and it is tradition in certain courts to wear robes and in other courts not to.
I see. And so when you don't wear a wig, is it something, or is there a reason behind that? Is it important to be seen as not quite so separate from the people in front of you?
I should have added that there are also practice directions about what judges wear in court. So it's not just tradition now, there are actually practice directions. I think the wig debate has been going on for many years, and different people will have different views. Personally, I think they're very relevant to a modern age. It defines where you are. This is not just another room where you're having a chat. This is serious. The importance of telling the truth is central. The gravity of the situation is being marked by the surroundings of the day. And yes, it does give anonymity to the judges and counsel. We don't have those in the magistrates' court, and that's purely historical. Yeah. I suspect that it's probably not true, actually, because I've seen some of the pictures of my predecessors from many years ago, and I think they did wear wigs, but different courts deal with things in different ways.
I think one of the reasons I was asking that was because the position of a judge is seen as something separate, and it is partly because of their attire, and as you said, there's a historical relevance to it. There's a quite practical importance as well, that you recognise this is a sombre and different space that you're in. But perhaps some of the negative impacts might be that it alienates the judiciary from the rest of society, and they don't seem like us. They seem like they come from a particular demographic and they have a particular education, and they aren't normal people.
Oh, I can speak for myself. I'm really normal. My parents came to England from Pakistan in the 1960s. I went to school in Slough. I didn't have a private education or anything like that. I ended up at Wolverhampton Polytechnic. I couldn't afford to sit the bar exams, so until 1990 you could just pitch up at Lincoln's Inn, pay them 300 quid and do it without actually having done a course. That was stopped. Wow. Yeah, it was stopped about 1990, 1991. And that's how I was called to the bar, and then did the exam to qualify as a solicitor, as a barrister. So I don't come from a privileged background. My parents didn't go to school, let alone go to university. I haven't been to and I hope Wolverhampton Polytechnic will forgive me. I haven't been to a top university, but I know my law, and I think I was an effective defence lawyer, and I would very much like to think that I am a fair and just judge. I'm not sure I agree with this idea that simply because you've got a uniform on, that you are different and alienating yourselves. I think most people recognise that courtrooms are a different place, and it's just a reflection. Nobody wants to be in a courtroom. Very few people want to be there. Certainly in the criminal justice system, the defendants don't want to be there at all. Even in civil cases, I mean, who wants to be in a courtroom? They're there because something has happened in their lives which has resulted in a dispute, and they are in a courtroom. And I think most people recognise that it's not the dress or the court dress which sets you apart. It is just a reflection of where you are.
Do you enjoy being a judge?
I am challenged every single day. And these days I'm challenged with dealing with people. I find the cases interesting. I find people interesting. And I suppose that's why I became a lawyer. I've always been interested in people and finding solutions to their problems. It's a privilege. It is a responsibility which one never forgets. Especially in some of the cases that we're doing, we're going to have a public profile and people watch on. And so it's about getting it right in that case, that particular case, but also it's about maintaining confidence in the justice system.
How do you get away from work? How do you strike a work-life balance?
Well, I try to get away as much as possible. I've got a Mark II Jaguar, which sort of breaks down. It's 1961, what they used to call an Inspector Morse car. I've got one of those, and it breaks down more than it sort of works. And so that keeps me really busy. It keeps me really distracted.
And do you still receive phone calls at night for warrants?
Yes, a number of us are on a rota system. Sometimes the police do need to make applications in the middle of the night. They may need to search someone's premises. In some circumstances, there may be an arrest warrant which is needed. Sometimes the police want to hold on to prisoners so that they can question them for longer. And so every night there is a judge on call somewhere to deal with those emergency applications.
How does it work? Do they email through papers, or is it done just on a phone call?
It's often done in person. So I deal with terrorism applications, and so I will actually go into the courthouse where there are secure lines and secure systems where we can ensure that confidentiality is maintained.
That's fascinating. Still having to work and be on call at night time.
It's not like when I was a defence lawyer. I mean, you'd get some client ringing you up just about every single night of the week. This is a rota. So, yeah, I mean, and not all judges. Remember, there are all sorts of different judges. I mean, you're talking about what I do. But most judges won't be doing what I do. I mean, a lot of judges are dealing with disputes in relation to employment law, or whether you're entitled to benefits, or your immigration status. The tribunal judges are the largest group of judges, and they deal with a vast array of work. And people sometimes focus on the criminal court judges as though they are the judges. Well, they're not, actually. They're a small minority of the judges.